Good evening to you both. And let's begin with the triggering of by-elections for June 23rd in a trio of ridings. NDP leader Naheed Nenshi will get his crack at earning a seat running in Edmonton-Strathcona, formerly held by Rachel Notley. Edmonton-Ellerslie was vacated in March when NDP member Rod Loyola resigned to run federally, and Olds Didsbury Three Hills recently opened up when Speaker Nathan Cooper resigned to represent Alberta in Washington, and it's a riding that will see Alberta Republican Party leader Cam Davies squaring off against UCP and NDP candidates. Okay, Stacey, how much attention do you expect these three by-elections to draw? Do they fly under the radar given time of year, or do they generate headlines?
Well, I think that, the one plus is that the election date is June 23rd. So they're sneaking it in right before the summer holidays hit, which I think is good because interest will wane. People will leave on their summer vacations, and it'll be a pretty tough time to be able to connect with people. So I think that the date alone is a good one, and they're sneaking it in. I have to say, listen, I think we'll all look at the three ridings and we'll look at them as a bit of a bellwether. But really the one that's going to generate the most attention is obviously the one that Mr. Nenshi is running in. And so if you take a look at that riding, it's been won 11 times out of 12 by the NDP. It's Rachel Notley's former riding. One has to assume that the party will throw everything it has to make sure that Mr. Nenshi comes out on top, obviously, in that riding, and by a hefty margin. I think, he's got to win it by a lot. He can't just win it by a skinny margin. And so I think that'll be the one that will garner the most attention. So, Sarah, cut and dry for Naheed Nenshi in Edmonton-Strathcona. How much pressure do you see weighing on the NDP leader to earn that seat in the legislature?
Well, I think Stacey just did a great job of building expectations for Nenshi in that riding. I think yes, it's obviously important that the leader of the opposition in the Alberta legislature gets a seat, but I think the really interesting and spicy riding will be Olds Didsbury Three Hills, where the Alberta Republican candidate Cam Davies is running to replace Nathan Cooper. I think that this is going to be a serious test of the UCP in their messaging with everything going on with the possible Alberta separation referendum. The results in that riding will be very, very telling as to what the mood is, I think, in the most conservative parts of the province. Stacey, on that point of Alberta Republican Party leader Cam Davies running in Olds Didsbury Three Hills, how do you see the UCP responding to that challenge in its bid to retain the riding? Well, I'll start out with a quote from Cam Davies himself, which basically said any result is going to be a show of growth in the movement. So he set the bar very low. And so I think, part of that is, one would think, is strategic to make sure that he puts the UCP sort of on their back foot in terms of how they respond and how they formulate their key messages to counter that. But I think that the Premier's already been doing a bit of that job as she's gone along. She's acknowledging the pain points that many Albertans are feeling, but she's also saying that what she's hearing is that many of them don't see separation as the inevitable, would be what I would say. And so I agree with Sarah. It's going to be an interesting one to watch, but Cam Davies has set the bar very low. So any growth in their numbers is going to be seen as a win. Sarah, regardless of riding, what issues do you see driving debate, dominating campaign trail discussions? Will it be this heavy issue of separation? I definitely think that separation is going to be up for discussion. But, I think we'll maybe talk about it, but the news shared by the UCP yesterday, to the surprise of absolutely everyone except them, around books in Alberta classrooms. So they're throwing, the UCP in my mind is throwing some red meat to their base to maybe try and distract and stave off some of those separatist fiery elements. of within their base. So we'll have to see. But obviously, I think the most important outcome will be in Edmonton, Strathcona, and obviously getting Naheed Nenshi into the House. To be honest, I find it really surprising that the UCP slow walked this, because having him in the House, I think, will do more to contrast the two leaders than having him out. So it's unfortunate that politics was played to this level, in contrast with what Mark Carney is doing with Pierre Poilievre's by-election, which he said there's no politics involved.
Okay, for us, next up, the build-out of new rules around which books can be found in Alberta schools.
We want to ensure transparency for parents so that they know what is available in their school library, and to have a process for complaints and concerns about book materials and other library materials.
The government plans to create guidelines to ensure age-appropriate book selection. This after several books with inappropriate content were discovered in school libraries across the province, 4 graphic novels in particular right there. The minister says he was approached by a group of parents about the content. Sarah, in response, Alberta Teachers Association calling this a slippery slope, questions where it ends. How warranted are worries that this evolves into book challenges, book bannings, censorship?
I see it as a slippery slope as well, and I find it very rich that any discussion of limiting of free speech comes from a Conservative Party, because Conservative values to me are live and let live. And so to dictate how things are done and to say this is acceptable and this is not is actually, in my mind, the height of hypocrisy coming from a Conservative government. That being said, we don't know in which grade these books were made available to. That information, to the best of my knowledge, was not presented yesterday. The minister said that he was met with some concerned parents. How did those parents find those materials? That I really want someone to answer that question for me, because I looked at the excerpt shared by the government, and while definitely inappropriate for some ages, it depends on what grades they were actually available to. And I would just like to say that those parents, I really hope, the most extreme and dangerous thing that kids have in their lives are these devices right now. It's what's on the internet that we should be most worried about, not books in schools.
Stacey, is this about books? Is this about process for determining which books are placed on library shelves? How do you weigh what's evolving here?
There's so much to unpack. I'm not even sure where to begin on this subject. Listen, I think part of this is catering to a certain demographic of the UCP. And there's no question that there is a vocal, small component of the UCP that is not about freedom and live and let live. They are about telling others how best they should live. And that is not my Conservative Party, but there's still an element of that within the Conservative Party. I think the other thing I would say is we have to be able to learn to have challenging conversations. And if we just take the book banning in isolation, I think Sarah really intimated at it, there are other platforms that we should be equally, if not more, concerned about. The other thing that I would say is, listen, movies and television shows have an age-appropriate rating system, and I'm not sure why we wouldn't be looking at already existing mechanisms with which to help us figure out age-appropriate content. So to me, I think that we're looking at this subject in isolation when we should not be. And online porn platforms, again, on those cell phone devices that Sarah pointed out, there are some really shocking statistics about kids under the age of 15 and what they have access to. And going back to the rating system, I mean, this tells me as a parent what level of involvement I need to have in what my kid is watching or reading or looking at. And I don't need another special interest group or another parent group telling me how I can best parent my child.
King Charles affirmed Canada's strength on the world stage in a rare appearance in the Senate today.
Canada faces another critical moment. democracy, pluralism, the rule of law, self-determination, and freedom are values which Canadians hold dear, and ones which the government is determined to protect.
In delivering the speech from the throne, the King touched on Canada's relationship with the U.S. and that the country can build new alliances and a new economy. And in laying out goals for the session, speech included references to cutting government spending growth to 2% and that the operating budget will be balanced over the next 3 years. Stacey, a whirlwind royal visit today, lasting roughly 24 hours over the span of the 2 days, if not less. How political a throne speech do you feel it ended up being, and what does it accomplish where the Carney government is concerned?
Well, I mean, listen, I'm going to declare, first of all, that I'm a monarchy supporter. So I was really excited to learn that the king would be coming over to deliver the throne speech. And so I looked at it from that vantage point first and foremost, that it's a historical moment for our country. And it is not often where we get, the head of the monarchy come over to deliver a one-of-a-kind speech, really. And so secondly, I would say that, the king showed his political astuteness. I mean, the speech was delivered in both official languages. He talked, very high level in aspirations about what Canada could be on the other side of unprecedented times. I mean, honestly, I think that his remarks really hit the high note on a bunch of fronts, including that we have the opportunity to build, which I thought was significant. And whether we assume that Prime Minister Carney wrote those words for the king, or whether the king had some hand in also some of the words that he was going to use. But I think it's notable for that reason alone is that it is time to build. And we're looking at public opinion polls where a lot of Canadians are feeling the same thing too. So dare I say, did this speech from the throne hit the nail on the head in terms of what Canadians are expecting and hoping for? I think it came pretty close.
Okay, so Sarah, now it closed on the line, the true north is indeed strong and free. What strikes you about the depth of reference to Canada-U.S. relations, the note the throne speech struck?
I mean, talk about expectations being high in terms of a throne speech, it being Mark Carney's first, and then also having the king deliver it. And so everything was, I think, riding on the tone that was struck and the words around asserting Canada's sovereignty coming from King Charles, especially because back home, Keir Starmer has invited, for some strange reason, Donald Trump to come for a state visit to Great Britain. And at a time when Canada is facing kind of an existential threat from the United States. And so, the need for King Charles, more home kind of country land to position itself in a post-Brexit context while trying to play nice with Trump, while Canada, also a part of the Commonwealth, is dealing with this really serious issue. Hopefully today allayed some of that kind of concern, but I think it'll be what's to come in terms of how King Charles continues to position himself in favor of supporting Canada's sovereignty and the UK's relationship with Trump. I don't think this is a one and done situation.
Stacey, on the point of what's to come, throne speeches typically lay out the government's plans for the session ahead. What's your takeaway from messaging and the reference to cutting spending, trade, even the environment?
Well, I think affordability, the message of affordability came through loud and clear, which I think is good. Canadians are struggling, and we can't forget that as the number one issue this government needs to tackle. And I think closely related to that is the relationships that Canada has on the world stage with existing allies, as well as the opportunity to forge new partnerships with new allies. I think that, part of the King's speech very clearly enunciated that. And I think the third thing, which again, it is quite tightly wound up with the first two is the opportunity for Canada to take a look at how it comes out on the other side of unprecedented times in a stronger position, closely related to economics, how we develop our resources, and how we get them to market. As we've seen over the last number of months with President Trump and the tariffs that he likes to put on and take off and put on, there's a great deal of economic uncertainty. And so I think my takeaway is, even if the relationship with the United States improves and we get a level of certainty, that does not mean that we can take our foot off the gas in terms of shoring up all of our other flanks, so to speak.
All right. On that note, we have to leave it there. We're out of time. Good to see you both. Thank you kindly for this.
Thanks.
Thanks. Nice to see you both.